Hello and welcome to this tutorial. In the previous tutorial we learned how to import the libraries, and in this one we're going to learn how to import the dataset. So this time we're going to have to do it both in Python and R, so let's start with Python. So I'm going to jump straight to Python, here we are. Okay, so the first thing to do before starting to import a dataset is of course to set a working directory. And that's the case anytime you want to import a dataset, you have to specify a working directory folder, and that must be the folder that contains your dataset. So to set this folder as working directory, it's very simple. What you need to do is to go to File Explorer here, because this is the window where you can go to all the files in your computer. So right now, as you can see, I'm on my desktop, and this is the Machine Learning AZ folder on my desktop. So let's go inside. Inside this folder we have the 10 parts, and we are in part 1 data preprocessing. So let's open the subfolder. Here we go. And this folder contains just one section. Let's open it. And that is the folder we want to set as working directory. And why is that? It's because it contains the data CSV file. You know, you can set any folder you want as working directory as long as they have the data CSV file. So once you reached this right folder in the File Explorer window, then you have two options. For those of you who are working on a Mac, well, you have this little button here to set this folder as working directory. And you just need to click on it, as I just did, and now this folder is set as working directory. So that's the first option. If you have this little button here on your screen, well, you can click on it to set the folder as working directory. And then for those of you who are on Windows, then this option here might not work for you. So what you need to do is also very simple. You just need to save your Python file into the folder that contains the dataset data.csv. And to save your Python file, you just need to click on here. And if you did not save it before, well, you will automatically have a window that will ask you to choose where to save your file. And once this Python file is saved in your folder that contains the dataset data.csv, well, what you need to do is simply click on this little button here, which as you can see is to run the whole file, and that will automatically set your folder as working directory. And actually there is a shortcut to do it even faster. It's, instead of clicking on this button here, you just need to press F5. And that will execute the whole file and set your folder as working directory at the same time. So you have the two options. For Mac users, you can click on this button here. And for Windows users, you save your file in the folder that contains the dataset, and then you execute the saved file by pressing F5, even if the file is empty. And for both of you, that will set your folder as working directory. So as I explained in the previous tutorial, the best library to import a dataset is pandas. So right now we're going to use pandas to import the dataset. We're going to declare a new variable that is going to be the dataset itself, and we're going to simply call it dataset. Okay, then equals, and now immediately we will use panda to import the data.csv dataset. So what we have to do is use the shortcut pd, that is the shortcut for pandas. Then you type dot, and then read underscore csv, parenthesis, and in the parenthesis, you input the name of your dataset, which is, of course, data.csv. Quote, parenthesis, all good. That's perfect. So let's select this line here and press Command and Control plus Enter to execute. Okay, as you can see in the console, the line of code was executed correctly. So that means that we correctly imported our dataset. And if we go to Variable Explorer now here, we can see that the dataset is actually here. And if we double click on it, here is the dataset. So we have our 4 columns, country, age, salary, purchased, and we have our 10 observations. So you have to understand that indexes in Python start at 0. So here the first observation index is 0, but that's Python. We're going to see that in R, indexes start at 1, but in Python you have to get used to the fact that indexes start at 0. So we have our 10 observations. If you're not very comfortable with the scientific notation, we can change that. Actually, I would prefer, the float number itself. So we're going to click on Format. So here we're going to change the 3 to 0 to have no decimal after the comma. And we're going to change the G to F to have a float. And when we click on OK, we have our salary this way, which some of you might prefer. Okay, so we're fine with our data set. Now let's click on OK. And now there is something very important to understand in machine learning in Python. It's that we have our data set, but we need to distinguish the matrix of features and the dependent variables vector. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to create the matrix of features. That is, if I go back to my data set here, we're going to create the matrix of the 3 independent variables. So basically we're going to put in a variable x, there's going to be the matrix, all those observations here. So basically the 3 columns here, the 3 first columns, which are the independent variables columns, and the 10 lines, which are the 10 observations. And then we will create the dependent variable vector, which is going to be the last column here with the 10 observations. Okay, so let's do this. Let's click on OK, and let's start by creating our matrix of features. Okay, so we're going to call it x equals, and then we're going to use the dataset variable that we just created, then dot, and we're going to take all the columns of features, the columns of independent variables, and to do this we're going to type iloc, then brackets, and then colon, comma, column -1. So don't worry about that, I'll explain everything. And then dot values. Okay, what did we just do here? By putting the colon here, that means that we take all the lines. Because what's on the left of this comma here is the lines of the dataset, and what's on the right of this comma are the columns. So by putting this colon here, that means that we take all the lines. And then at the right of this comma, we typed column -1. So that means that we take all the columns except the last one. -1 means that we don't include the last one, and column means that we take all the columns. So column -1 means that we take all the columns except the last one. Okay, and dot values means that we want to take all the values. That's just a Python syntax, and that's how it works. So you're going to see, let's select this line and execute. Here it is. The X matrix was imported correctly. And now let's type here X in the console. And as you can see, we have our 3 first columns, the 3 first columns of the data set, as you can see. Here, the column country, age, salary, and we don't have the last column purchased. So that's good, that's our matrix, that's the matrix of features, the matrix of independent variables, and you'll understand step by step why we need to do this in Python. Okay, so I'm going to click on OK here, and now what we have to do is to create the dependent variable vector. So we're going to call it y equals, and now we're going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to copy this line here and paste it here. And we want to take the last column. So it's going to be the same. We're going to take all the lines here with the column here. And here at the right of the comma, we are going to choose the last column, which is... So we have to input here the index of the last column. So let's go to our data set and find out what it is. So as I said earlier, indexes in Python start at 0. So index for country is 0, index for age is 1, index for salary is 2, and index for purchased is 3. So here, since we want the last column, we are going to input 3. And we'll be fine. Let's select this line, Command and Control plus Enter to execute. Here it is, here's the Y. Let's type Y here and press Enter. And here it is, we have our last column. No, yes, no, this is the purchase columns that I remind tells if yes or no the customer bought the product. Okay, so that's it for Python. We imported the dataset and prepared the data correctly. Now we're going to jump to R and see how we have to do it. And you're going to see that it will be much more simple because we won't have to make a distinction between the matrix of features and the dependent variable vector. So let's go to R. Okay, so here I am on R, and as for Python, we need to set the working directory. So to do this, we have to go to Files here. Here I'm on my desktop. So let's go to our folder Data Preprocessing Part 1. Here it is, Section 2. And this is the right folder that contains the dataset data.csv. So this is the folder that you want to choose to set as working directory. And now to set this working directory on R, you need to do one more thing. You need to click on this More button here and click on Set as Working Directory. And here it is. Now we know that this is the right working directory and we are ready to start importing the dataset. Okay, so to do this in R, what we need to do is very simple. We will just need one line of code. So as in Python, we're going to call it dataset. So that's the variable that will be the dataset itself. And now to import a dataset is very easy. You need to type read.csv, and then in parentheses, you just type the name of your dataset in quotes. So here you have to type data.csv. And that's it. That's all you need to do. So now we're gonna select this line of code and execute. Okay, so let's have a look at our dataset. To do this, you just need to click here on the dataset and it just displays here. Okay, so we have our 4 columns: country, age, salary, purchased, and our 10 observations. And what's interesting to see here is that unlike Python, indexes don't start at 0 but at 1. So that's why the first observation starts at 1 here and ends at 10. So that's the second distinction you have to understand between Python and R. Of course, you don't have to program on both. You can choose the one you prefer. But if you want to program on both, as I usually do, it's good to have this distinction in mind. Okay, so we have our dataset. It's all fine. And as I just said, here we don't have to make the distinction between a matrix of features and a dependent variable vector. And this will make perfect sense for you as we go along with this part 1 data preprocessing. You'll perfectly understand why in the next tutorials. Okay, so that's it for the importing the dataset step of the data preprocessing phase. So that's it for this tutorial. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, which will be to learn how to take care of missing data. Because sometimes your dataset will contain missing data and you have to take care of this, and that's what we're going to learn in the next tutorial. So I look forward to seeing you there, and until then, enjoy machine learning.